Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to our free virtual educational summit. The summit theme is Google is in secondary. We are observant and we are live. I hope you enjoyed St. Valentine's Day on Sunday well, and you are ready for our summit today. We have a great range of speakers today, so I would like to introduce you to them. So hi, Dan. Hi, James. Hi, Lawrence. Hi, Bogdan.
Hello.
Hello. So just a little bit of overview. I am based in the Czech Republic, and Daniel Taylor is CEO of Observance, and he is based in Prague, and he oversees everything from Prague. So if you want to touch with Dan, feel free. Before we get into that, I will just share my screen with the presentation. So I would like to say also huge thanks to our great partner, Acer, because we are able to run our summits for free just to this great cooperation. You may see the link to the surveys. Feel free to submit it and you have a chance to win free seat for our upcoming event. Also, feel free to join our social media channels. And Dan, would you like to say a bit more about our ISTI certification program?
Yeah, just quickly, obviously we're a Google partner. We've been a Google partner for 10 years. The only thing we do outside of Google is ISTI, which probably a lot of you know is from the US, and it's a great education technology certification. It's device and technology agnostic, so it doesn't matter if your school is using Google, Microsoft, any kind of devices. It's all about the pedagogy, and there's a bunch of ISTI standards. If you're interested in it, just take a look at aelearninglab.com to learn more. It's a fantastic certification. If you work in any kind of technology role at school, whether you're a teacher or whether you might be an IT director, anything to do with technology, a coach, it's a great certification. It's becoming more and more popular. It's big in America. It's big in international schools. It's now starting to get popular in the UK and Europe as well. So check it out. And it's a really interesting thing to look at and a great thing for your CV and resume, a great certification.
Thank you, Dan. Also, I think this is a great topic, Dan, and you would like to announce a bit more details about it as well.
Yeah, well, I can't announce anything right now. Tomorrow, Google is going to be announcing some big changes. Obviously, it's not public yet, but there's going to be obviously some changes to G Suite for Education coming and a lot of exciting things. So if you haven't yet registered, stay tuned for register for Google's announcement tomorrow. We've got a bunch of video content and explanation stuff coming out on Thursday. So please stay tuned tomorrow. I don't know if, Veronica, if we can find the link for the Google webinar, we'll stick it up here. If one of you guys could find it, we'll stick it up on the screen or in the chat. And I'd recommend everyone join it. There's 3 time zones. You can do it in the US, you can do it in Europe, or you can do it in Asia. So a lot of announcements. Check it out.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Also, I would like to announce one more thing. So if you want to become a Google certified coach, feel free to check our website and also register for that program. I think that, Bogdan, you can recommend it as well.
This is for the person who has a program. Yeah. Maybe you're already you're already a trainer, you're already an innovator. What's left to do? You need to become a coach. Yet another
Yeah, just to be superstar. So thank you so much. So the first expert who is going to start today is Lawrence. Hi, Lawrence.
Hi, Veronica. How are you?
I am doing well, thank you. Because I am here with you, so it's awesome, you know. This men team. Thank you for joining us. So Bogdan and James, we will see each other later on. So thank you for that.
Yes. Good luck, Lawrence, and see you in a bit.
Thank you, Bogdan.
So sorry, Bogdan. And Lawrence, I will use your presentation.
Brilliant. Thank you, Veronica. So what I'm going to be talking about today is applied digital skills. And I think this is really important in this time that we face ourselves in with lockdown and with the pandemic. So just before I get started, I just want to give you a bit more information about myself. So as Veronica introduced me earlier, my name is Lawrence Tijjani. I'm a former computing teacher. I left teaching, I think it's 3 years ago. But don't worry, I'm still involved in education. I go in and support schools with the use of G Suite and ICT across the curriculum. And I also have a social enterprise that works with disadvantaged children. And I'm working on a diversity project, and more information about that is going to be announced soon. So just keep close to the Apps Events Twitter account for more information about that. Now, let's talk about applied digital skills. I mean, like, we might have heard digital skills, but actually, how do we apply them? And it's never been so important during this time where students are relying on digital skills. So Google have created a curriculum that equips students with practical skills that will help them succeed not only in the evolving job market, but also in practical life situations. And as a teacher, that's one of the key things that were really important to me. Is not that they could just use these digital skills in my classroom, but they could also use it outside of the classroom in their life as well, picking the right applications or the right tools to do a job. And this is what this curriculum does. So Google made a commitment that every school to have access to tools and skills that will set them up for success in the job market today. So I believe all students should have an opportunity to meaningfully engage with technical skills and skills of the future, because learners today need basic digital literacy skills. And that goes back to what I mentioned earlier, that a lot of students are now calling on these digital skills. And not just students, teachers as well. They're relying on them. And the fundamentals of this course, Apply Digital Skills, is they have 4 things that they focus on. So communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking. I just want to go back to that first word. The second word, collaboration. That's what we're all basing ourselves on now. As we are doing this summit, we're all collaborating and we're across the world. So it's never been so important. And this holds true for life and in particular jobs as well. So Google have developed Applied Digital Skills. Applied Digital Skills is a free video-based online curriculum that prepares students of all ages for the growing number of jobs that require basic digital literacy. So what we're going to be doing in this session also is going through this platform. And as it's come up in the banners, please do ask any questions that you might have. I'm keen to see how you might use this in your school, your organization. So before we go and have a look at the curriculum and see what's all this is about, I just wanted to give a nice kind of overview. What I like about this is that it's project-based learning. So it's a video curriculum that provides step-by-step instructions so students can learn also at their own pace. They can pause, they can rewind, they can fast forward. And this is them setting the pace on how they want to go through the work. Obviously, a teacher will set a deadline, but there's no more of, oh, how do I do this, miss? How do I do that? You could actually send them a link to these videos and get them to work through it, and they develop those skills. There are now over 200 hours of content on the platform that can fit into any classroom. And that's the key thing that I want to bring out in this presentation. A lot of the time when we hear digital skills, it's, oh, that belongs in IT or computing. But actually, this can be embedded in all of your lessons or all of the different subjects that your school might offer. So it could be in English, history, it could even be in form time or tutor time, okay? It's not only teaches students digital skills they need, but also links them with project-based life learning skills. And as I mentioned, collaboration, creativity, critical thinking, and communication. And by engaging students in video instructions in collaboration, the curriculum aims to support teachers in providing more personalized learning support instructions for each student. So just want to go over these before we jump into the platform. Is we've put it into 2 streams. So you've got your digital skills, which involves coding, spreadsheets, data visualization, graphics design, document formatting, and then you've got your practical life skills, which is more kind of like organization, budgeting. So using a Google Sheet to do your budgeting, when the students go off to uni or something like that. Creating CVs, group decision-based makings. So this is all encompassed in this platform, and it draws on all the Google apps as well. So it's a good place to start if you're a beginner, even as a teacher. If you're not very strong with potentially some of the apps, you could, go through this as well. So yeah, it's a very strong platform. And I mentioned earlier about the 4 C's. So it emphasizes throughout the curriculum the need to continuously practicing the 4 C's. While we know communication and collaboration are integral in life, as well as in work, we also understand that many students do not have regular opportunities to build on these skills because of maybe the demand of the curriculum. So they could do this outside of the curriculum, alongside the lesson, by working on creative group projects. The curriculum helps to build students in these skills areas. So just going and looking at some of the resources that come with the Applied Digital Skill platform is not only do you get the videos that have been recorded for you to share with your students and for them to create a task, but from a teacher's point, you get lesson plans for all of the different units that are provided. And when we do go into the platform, you will see there is a ton of lessons that you could use. So they could be used as project-based learning, or they could be used as a one-off lesson, and you can customize them. So an example might be is I need them to use Google Sheets, but I don't really have the time in my curriculum to go through some of the fundamental skills that they should have picked up maybe in previous years. I could set this as a homework to bring them all up to a common standard, and I can now focus on maybe the more advanced skills in my lesson as well. And that goes for your English, your history teachers or geography teachers. You don't have to wait for them to do this in IT. You could actually assign this to them to allow them to access that resource that you want to do in your lesson. And lastly, the video-based learning style is self-directed, and this is adaptable to each student's pace, but is also trackable by the teacher. So you can actually see what they're doing and what part of the curriculum or module they are on. So what we're just going to do now is I've given you an overview of the Applied Digital Skills curriculum. Is what I want to do now is actually let's go and have a look at the platform. So let me just come out of here, and I'm just going to jump across now to my Applied Digital Skills. So let's do that. Okay, brilliant. So this is the Applied Digital Skills platform, and what I'll do is after the chat I will get the link for you, but you can simply just go into Google and type Applied Digital Skills, and this is the homepage here, and it's had a real kind of update recently as well. So as a teacher, you can see that I'm a teacher over here where it says teacher, and I've already signed in. So I'm just going to click teacher. If it's your first time going to the site, you will have the option to sign in, and then you will just have to proceed through the steps to register, and that will link to your Google account. So the registration is very straightforward and easy. So I'm going to click on teacher, and I was logged in there, but I'm just going to jump into my classes, should I say. So just wait for that to load up. And this is my dashboard where I can add my different classes. As you can see, there are some bits that look quite similar to your Google Classroom. So these are the classrooms that I have created previously. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I've got a couple of options. I can go and create a class. So if I go to right here, I can click on create a class. But I could do it that way, put a class name in. But if I'm already using Google Classroom, I might just want to import a class from my Google Classroom dashboard. So I'm just going to close this actually, go over to the right and see where it says connect your dashboard with Google Classroom. I'm simply just going to go down to where it says connect with Classroom and just click on that. So now I'm able to manage my classes and my register, create mark assignments, collect students' work, okay? And I can browse the different menus as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go and connect with Classroom. So this button here, so we just zoom in there, and you can see now I can connect. So this will open up a new tab. It will say, grant permission. Yes, I want to be able to see the rosters and the classroom. So I'm just click allow and allow there. And you would have noticed that it's already picked up my login. Okay, so I'm going to click allow. And now that will refresh. That's refreshing just up in the top corner there. It's just refreshing in the background. Okay. And now I've connected my Google Classroom with Applied Digital Skills. So now I'm just going to click on create. Let's zoom out. Oops. So click on create. Whoops. Let's just zoom out. Click on create. And now I just wait for it to load up. And you can see what it's done here is it's already picked up my different Google Classrooms from Classroom. It's listed them from there. So I've already imported that one. So what I could do is now just click on best practices for remote learning. Click on there. And I'm happy with that. But you can see it's still grayed out at the bottom. And the reason why that is because I need to select who is this class going to be. Is it middle or high school students or adults? I'm going to go for middle or high school students, and then click import. So that will bring that class into my deck, okay? And I'm getting a little message in the bottom left-hand corner there, just saying successfully imported. So that's brought that in. It's brought that class in, okay? So I can just now go and click onto that class. So I'm just going to click onto that class and just wait for that to load up. And now this will give me the class details and an overview of the class. And this is where I'll be able to add in my students. Just give that a little bit of a refresh. Oh, there we go. I've got it there. So I've got lessons. And at this moment in time, I haven't assigned any lessons yet. So if I click on people, you can see there's a student 1 that's in this class, but invitation is pending. Okay. Now, what's important here is before the student is actually part of this classroom, they have to accept the invitation. So what I can simply do is I can say in the bottom right here, where it says share instructions to classroom, I can just click on this button, share instructions to classroom. And then I can just go and select the class. So I can say best practices for remote learning, just click on that. And I can say, is it going to be an assignment? Is it a question or make an announcement? I might just go and click make an announcement and then click go. And it will say, please sign into the Applied Digital Skills using a Google account. And then I can just post that on for students. So just post that and they will see that in their stream. So if I just click post, and I'm just going to go back because I'm happy with that. That's been posted to my classroom. So what I can do is if I just switch to the student view now. So this is a student account. So I've sent that to the students. That's going to appear in their stream. I'm going to click sign in. So this is how easy it is for a student. It will ask the student to confirm their email address. So there's no having to type in passwords. That's all in there because it's all synced. That welcomes me. And what you can see now, if I can just zoom in, let's see if I can zoom in a bit. Okay, can't really zoom in, but what it's just saying is you've been invited to a classroom, and as simple as that for them, they can just click on join class. Okay, now they're a part of that class. Okay, and that will load up on their screen for them. So that was really simple in terms of getting the students into the class. So just go back now to the class. If I just refresh that, this screen, and just give it a moment while it's coming in. So that would just load up, and you can see now this student is being assigned to the class. Okay, so we've got our student into the class, but we haven't assigned any work for the student, or we haven't assigned a task for them to complete or videos for them to watch. So what I can do is go to lessons, and here I would simply click on add applied digital skills lessons for students to work on, or I could just click on here where it says add lesson. But I'm just going to click on add lesson, and this will take me to the applied digital skills curriculum. And there's a couple of things that I just want to go through here. So I can have a different audience or a different age groups that they might be at. I can actually also look by the digital tools that I might want to filter by. So app scripting, some lovely app scripting sessions there as well. Drawing, drives, forms. So if there's a particular application I want them to work on, I could do that too. Or I could do it by topic as well. So let's just zoom in there so we can see. We've got communicating, digital foundation skills, digital literacy, anything you can filter through there. Zoom out there. And what I've got over here is I've got collections. So these are collections that have been put together by the Google team that think actually doing these collections will actually make sense as a run of lessons to do. So like I said, keeping your kids learning at home, which is a good one, or work from home, teach from home. So there's a lot of collections there, and I can go and click on see all, and that will give me the other collections that are in place there. But I can go through and we'll have a quick run through there. When I first started to promote this or train people on this, there were only 32 lessons. That has grown massively to 93 lessons, and it is still growing too. So I can scroll through there. You've got the what if, create a presentation all about a topic. That there are loads of lessons, tons of lessons there. And I really do encourage you to, just go through and have a look and see what applies to your school. Maybe have a think about that question. Where could I use this in my curriculum, in my school, in my organization? So I keep on scrolling down just to see. So there's a wealth of them there. But okay, get the picture here. These are all the applications. But how do I add this? So I would simply, if I was from a teacher's point of view, let's click on this one, write an if then adventure story. Click on there. So I have a couple of options. I can go through the different lessons and check what the resources are ahead of time before the students. And that probably is good practice. I want to know what is expected to come up. And then I can start to think about, any misconceptions that my students may have as well. So I'm happy with that. Let's just imagine I've watched it. I can then just go to teaching materials. And this is what I was talking about. You have the lesson plans, which I'm going to open up in a new tab. You have a sample rubrics, which we'll have a look at quickly. And what kid doesn't like a certificate? So they get a certificate of completion that you can download and fill out once your students have completed the course. So let's just go and quickly have a look at this. So let's have a look at lesson plans. I'm going to open up a new tab. So it just makes it easier in the rubrics in a new tab. So let's just go on to this. So as mentioned, here is a lesson plan. So it has lesson objectives. It gives you an overview of the duration that you should be spending on it. Now, with the duration, you've got to remember that that's based on you. You know your students better than anyone. This is just a rough guidance. So you have the different lessons there, and they even give you example material. So you can actually share some of the example material with your students and say, hey, this is what I'm expecting you to complete, but I'm challenging you to go to the next level on this presentation. So remember, all of this is completely free. And if you wanted to edit it, you would simply just go to File and make a copy, and that would be saved to your drive, and you can add in what you want or remove what you would want from the lesson plan. Okay, so we're just going to quickly go on rubrics now. And we've got the rubrics, which is essentially an assessment grid, which allows you to see actually, again, what is the standard of work that my students need to complete. You can make a copy of this sheet for each student. You can put your comments in there and then put the scores. And as I mentioned earlier, here is the example material that it produces for you. And again, all of this is free. So I can click on here now and I can just go and have a look at the example material. So this is, as they say in the UK, here's one I made earlier, moment where you can go through and show this to your students. Okay, so we've got that. So again, that's really handy. So we're just going to go back now because I actually haven't added it to my class. I've just gone through the different resources that you have. To add it to my class, I would simply just click on Add to Class. Then I would just select the class and then click on Add to Class. Okay, so that's been added to my class. But what I haven't done is I haven't maybe created an assignment. Okay, so what I would do is click on Create a Google Classroom assignment. So they get that message in Google Classroom that I'm expecting them to log in to apply digital skills. So I can just click Create a Google Class assignment, just like we did with the announcement earlier. But this time, I'm just going to select that one, the right class, and then make a decision to say create an assignment. Do that, click on Go. And then I could provide further instructions, and this will have a link to that assignment they need to start on. So let's just change that to topic to say I want them to do this on Thursday. I could give them some points, let's leave it as 100. And all I would simply do is just assign like you would normally do in Classroom. And that's been done, okay? So I just now would go back to my classes. So click on my classes. And that will take me back to my class. But what I can now go and show you is as a student, so just switch to student screen now, should I say. Now just give this a refresh actually, because at the moment it says no current lessons. But when I refresh it, you can see a lesson has now been assigned. Okay, so that if then adventure story has now been assigned to that student. So I'm just gonna zoom out there and then click on that link now. And now the student can start to go through this now. And what you can see is it will have the videos explaining to the student what they need to do. So this is just the introduction video. But if I just click next, and maybe just give you an example of just how clear the instructions are, because that's really important to show you. Let's just see if I just do that.
In this activity, your group will collaborate to select the setting, characters, and problems for your story.
So this is how the videos are.
Collaboration uses technology to share information.
I'll just turn that down a little bit so you can hear me.
Decisions. It allows people all over
so the videos will give them step-by-step instructions on what they need to do. So it's very supporting and it accommodates the different students' needs. So I can put captions on as well in this. And the students can also read the transcript for the video if there was anything they were unsure about. So again, this is a really handy tool there. So I'm just going to pause that now. And if I go back to the teacher dashboard and I click on my class, just click on there. What I can then see from a teacher's point of view, and hopefully this loads up for me, is I can start to see the progress of my students. So just like I said, as I was mentioning while it was loading, it then tells me what percentage they've completed of the course. So I zoom in there, I can see the percentage of what they've completed. I can then check the videos that they've watched, what projects they've submitted, and also their surveys as well. So at the beginning, for each assignment, they have an entry survey, just trying to find out what they know. And at the end of it, it will have what they have learned. So actually you can measure what progress they've made over time, and actually if they do understand the skills as well. So that is an essential what applied digital skills is. And I think definitely go onto the platform and have a look. And what I'll just leave you with, if we just go back to my slide deck, is just some reflections of, questions to think about. What lessons do you think will help your students be most prepared for the 21st workplace? Identify one time of year or date when you think one of these lessons would be appropriate. What digital skills are your students most interested in learning? So there's a range of different ones there that you can have a think to prompt you to think about, how can I implement this in my organization? I know that was a whirlwind tour, and I really hope you got something from it. And do reach out if you do have any further questions on applied digital skills. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Lawrence. It was awesome. I really didn't know that you have already like 93 lessons, It's a great change. It's awesome.
Yeah, honestly, it's just grown over time. And, as with a lot of if you've been using Google Classroom, they listen to feedback and they try and create lessons that, they feel are actually really important. My favorite lesson is some of the app scripting. I've been able to learn some app scripting on there as well.
Great. Thank you. And thank you very much for great and clear instructions. So I think that everyone can see how to log in, how to use it, and feel free. Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. Have a great day. And thank you for your presentation.
No problem. Bye.
And now I would like to invite our next trainer, Katie Steen. Hi, Katie. How are you doing? We can't hear you.
How about now?
Yes, it's great.
Okay.
It's great. Hi, Katie. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks. How are you?
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. We are looking forward to listening to your presentation. It's great that we have different range of presentation and sessions today. So it's great. I would like to mention that Katie is based in Barcelona. So that's also a good change, because Lawrence is based in London, Katie in Barcelona, and then we are going to have another trainers from different countries as well.
All over the world. We have a global Google community here.
Yeah. Yes, and that's great. That's great. So, Katie, I will bring your presentation on the screen if you want to.
Yeah, that would be great.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thanks. Okay, so today I am talking a little bit about Google tools for differentiation, which is one of my favorite topics. And I'm really excited to share with you a couple of tips and tricks that I think are really valuable for the differentiated classroom. And this is me. So these are all the places that you can find me. I would love to connect with you on Twitter, Instagram, or my website. And I'd love to hear from you after the session, how you're using some of these different tools. And so today, we're not going to cover anything groundbreaking in terms of new tools. We're looking at Google Forms and Google Docs. But my theme for myself today is simple tools tools, but big impact. So I want to show you a couple of examples of how I use forms and docs in my classroom, but to really help you get the most out of them, especially when planning for differentiated instruction. So hopefully you'll see something new you want to try today, and maybe you'll pick up a new trick that will enhance how you're using Google Forms and Docs, some of these simple tools that are really a lot more powerful than we give them credit for sometimes. So let's go ahead and get started. The first idea that I want to talk about is Google Forms as a pre-assessment or an exit ticket. Of course, exit tickets are not new. They're a really great way to get a snapshot of what your students know and understand about a particular topic. And I do love a good post-it. So I love a post-it where you can have students, jot down their ideas or answer some questions at the end of class and stick it on the door on the way out. But I will just admit and be very honest that as a teacher, I've never been very diligent, we can say, about taking those paper post-its and actually putting that data into my grade book or doing something with it next. So for me, using the digital exit ticket in the form of a Google form helps me collect that data, keep it, and have it to plan my lessons and also to look at in the future when I'm going back and trying to see where my students are. So I've just taken the reality that paper doesn't work for me so well when it comes to tracking student data and student results. So I've switched to the digital. And so let's take a look at a quick quiz that I have here on cells, and I'll show you a few ways that I use some of the features of forms to really make it work for me. So here, for example, is a quick check on cells. So I'm going to put in my email address. That's my number one tip when you're doing anything that you're collecting information from students, is to make sure you put a box for their name or collect email addresses so that you know who is giving what. It seems like a simple tip, but it's one we often forget until it's too late. And so I'm starting off with a couple of multiple choice questions, which is one of the basic question formats in forms. Which part of the cell makes proteins? We have some choices. I just want to know some basic content questions. What do they know? So that I know if my students are ready to move forward. But one big tip that I have is to always add the I don't know option when you're giving a formative assessment for students, especially as a pre-assessment or an exit ticket. And what I found is just giving that option means my students are a little more honest about what they know and what they don't know. And since this is for me to gather data on my students' knowledge level, it's really important that I get accurate information if I can. So adding in that I don't know option gives students an answer when they're not sure, and they don't necessarily feel as tempted to guess and then give you inaccurate data. So I'm going to go ahead and say I don't know which part of the cell makes proteins, because I really don't. Not a science teacher in my teaching life. And then I've used the ability to put in a photo, so you can use photos and videos in Google Forms. So it's such a nice addition to making digital quizzes. This is green. I'm pretty sure that that's a chloroplast that has chlorophyll in it. Okay, then two other question formats that I use to really get good information from my students is the Likert scale. So how well do you understand the parts of the cell? When I'm doing this as an exit ticket or pre-assessment, I want to know what students think and how comfortable they feel with the material. So having them sort of self-report on that information can be really useful. And a feature that's great with the Google Form question format is that these tags are customizable. So I can, instead of just giving them 1 to 5, I can give my own tags that really help them understand what I'm asking. So if the question is, how well do you understand the parts of the cell? They can just say, not at all, I'm really confused. Or I know it so well that I could teach my friend. And you can put that in whatever language makes the most sense for your students. And then the last form so I'm going to say maybe 3. And that's what's great about the Likert scale as well, because it can be intimidating to say, I really don't understand it all, or I'm an expert. So having some choices in the middle, I think students are a little more comfortable. Anyone's a little more comfortable being honest. about their level and doing kind of some reflection and self-assessment. And then the last is the open-ended text format where you can just capture their questions. So what questions do you have about cells? And you'll notice I didn't make this one mandatory. So this does not have the little star that indicates it's a required question. The students may or may not have questions, but if they do, this can be a great place to just collect them, capture them all in one place, and then I can address them later. So I'm gonna go ahead and submit that form. And if you're familiar with forms, you know that there are lots of different options you can set up. So you can have a copy of this emailed to your students if you want them to keep a copy of it or not, and it can just be for you. But the power of forms is not so much that it's a digital quiz. That is something we've been using for a long time, but it's how you analyze the data. And this is where it really changes things as far as differentiating instruction and getting data that's quick and really clear and useful to then plan for future instruction. So if, for example, I'm using this as an entry assignment, so if this is something on the board, a do now or a bell ringer for my students to do as they come in to the classroom, they do this very quickly. It takes maybe 2, 3, 4 minutes, 5 minutes for them to complete this while I'm taking attendance and doing other things. Or maybe this is on the board, on the shared screen on a Zoom window. It's a virtual class, and they can kind of do that as everyone's getting set up. And you can see then that the data comes in super quickly. So I have an immediate breakdown of information that I can then make decisions really quickly. So if I just want to, if I'm doing this as my students are coming in and I need to make some quick decisions about what to do with this information, I'm going to look at the summary tab. So we can see on the summary is going to give us an overview of this data and let us make some quick decisions. So I can see this first question. I have a beautiful pie chart that easily breaks down how my students responded. And I can see that the right answer here is ribosomes is the answer to this question. And only a third of my students have gotten that correct. So I know very quickly that we have not mastered this material and we're going to have to do something. And what I choose to do is the next question. So I know that with my handy little I don't know option, about 40% of my students have admitted that they don't know the answer to this question. So they feel comfortable enough to say that. And we can then move forward. And then I know about another third of my students, they have chosen the wrong answer and they're confused for sure for whatever reason that might be. And I can see that for both of my Google or my multiple choice questions. And then when you get down to your nice Likert scale, you get a very quick bar graph. So it's data that is so quick to collect. Visually, you can then analyze it very quickly and make some decisions. And then I have all my questions that have been captured. So what I do with this information next is up to me. I know for sure that I can't just move on to the next topic. We're probably going to need to do some review, address some questions, and refresh this information before we move on if I had something else planned for the day. Now, if I were using this as an exit ticket instead, so if this was something my students did at the end of a lesson, that I have more time to dig into the data, and instead maybe I want to use this to plan for my lesson for tomorrow, plan some groups, plan some different activities to either move forward with this content or move some students on to the next content, and maybe I need to pull some students to refresh and go over this in more depth. Google Forms quickly gives me that information too. And I can come over here to the question tab and dig in to this information more deeply. So here's our drop-down menu of our 4 questions, and we can look at each one individually and get more information. So I have which part of the cell makes proteins, and now I have a breakout of all the different response choices that I had. And I know here if I click on 12, I see that there are 12 responses, and I can see very quickly, which of my students gave that response. So what you can see here is response 1, response 2. If you don't collect email addresses, that's what you'll see. But if you're using this with your students and they have Google accounts and they're logged in and you collect those email addresses, then you can see the responses and you can click there and see a list of that. So immediately, if you're wanting to use this to make flexible groups, to split up into different activities, you have a list of students, and I'm going to take all of my students who wrote I don't know, and I'm going to work with them in one capacity. I've got my students who got the right answer, so I have a group of students here, and maybe I'm going to take them and put them somewhere else. So quick information, very little effort on students' part and your part, and now we have great valuable data to then help us plan a differentiated lesson. And then if you want to go even further, if you want to sit down with one student, or you're coming up to assessment or conferences and you want to get the picture of one student individually, of course, you have that option to look at each student one at a time and see the full picture of their responses. So this is just, again, one idea of how I use Google Forms to help me gather important data and make the process of data collection and assessment and then using that to differentiate learning a little easier and more efficient, and takes a lot of the burden of the work and the collecting the data and to figuring things out off of me. So I can use this tool to speed up the process and be a little more efficient. And then I can spend my time taking the data that Google Forms gives me and using that to plan my lesson or to make some decisions about learning. Okay, the next feature that I want to talk about with Forms is using another feature of that Forms offers, which is the quiz feature, which lets you auto grade and then give automatic feedback to students. So I want to look at that as a self-check quiz. And for me, formative assessments, multiple choice quizzes have their limitations as far as how much information we can get about students, to be sure. But they're great for quick checks, and they're great for little checkpoints along the way of a unit to give you information and also to give students information. And so I use this feature to help get rid of sort of the bottleneck when we are working with students in different groups. That can be one of the biggest challenges in a differentiated classroom, is that if you have a lot of students doing different activities, they might even be doing them at different times. And if you end up that all students need to come to you at every point in the way and wait for you to give feedback or to give the next instruction, you can end up with a bottleneck, which can make it much more challenging to actually navigate that classroom. So this is one trick that I use, which is to use the forums as another tool to kind of organize learning and propel students forward. So let's take a look at what that would look like on the student perspective. So if we're going to do a percentages self-check, is multiple choice the perfect tool for assessing math knowledge and understanding? No, probably not. But is it going to give me enough, and is it going to give my students enough at one moment in their unit to know if they're kind of on track or if they're very off track? Yes, I think it can. So let's take a look at that. If we know what percent of 16 is 4, I think I know this one. I'm going to go ahead and say 25% and submit that response. Okay, I'm going to view accuracy as a student, and that's going to give me my score, whether I got that question right or not, and feedback. So I can see, yes, I did get that question right, and my feedback from my teacher is excellent. Start preparing for the next section by reading pages 23 to 25 of your textbook. So instead of just, yes, you're right, or no, you're wrong, you can give feedback that's going to, that could give really whatever you want to say to students. And I'm using it to give my students their instructions to move on to the next step. Now, let's look at what happens if I got that wrong. Let's submit another response, and we'll say it's 50. Okay. And I'm going to view accuracy, and sure enough, that is the wrong answer. So I can see that I got wrong. I can see what the right answer is, but the key piece here is that now I'm able to look at this feedback, which is, why don't you spend some time reviewing this concept? And I have pointed them towards a Khan Academy video that's embedded right in the response. So right here, they can click on this link or click on the video. And right in that moment, they get that feedback, they see that they got it wrong, and they get a resource for what to do next. And then maybe from here, they do some more practice, they take the assessment again, and then they're ready to move on. And I think what I like about this is that it gives students that feedback and that quick response immediately as soon as they've done the work. There's no lag between when they've done it and when they get the feedback, and they get the next step right away. And yes, you can absolutely use things like Google Classroom or an LMS to give students the next activity in the task. But we know that, sometimes a list of things that students have to work through on something like an LMS, that can be hit or miss on whether they're going to be able to go through it independently without questions. And this puts it right there. It's linked in and they're ready to go, which I love. So you can see that in the questions. So on our actual form as a teacher, the benefit here is, so an answer key, this is where you can edit your feedback for correct answers and feedback for incorrect answers. And you have awesome tools where you can add in text, you can add in a link, okay? You can add in a video, and you can pop in several different media tools right there, which I love. So it's there, it's ready to go. Yes, the feedback loop is instant, immediate, and ready to go, which is great. Okay. So those are my two kind of quick tips for using Google Forms. Maybe it's a way that that you haven't used them before, or something to add in to really use them to their full capacity. So there's a lot of simple tools that Google Forms has that have a lot of power, especially if you're looking into the data or using them as something for students to use and to get information for themselves. It's not even necessarily all about the information for you, even though you also get that great feedback as students collect it. Okay. The next thing I want to look at is forms. So my tips today are really about kind of the organization of a Google, I'm looking at docs, excuse me, is about the organizational aspect of differentiated classrooms and how hard that can be sometimes to navigate and organize and keep our students knowing where they are. And that can be a real challenge to trying differentiation and feeling as though you can control what's happening and you have a good picture and snapshot of what's happening in the class. And so I like to use just the simple tools that we're all really familiar with already and use them as a way to harness their power and really organize what's happening in your classroom. So one of my favorite ways to do this is something called differentiated playlists. And we're also gonna look at digital choice boards. So these might be some ideas that you're familiar with. And I first learned about the differentiated playlist from the Cult of Pedagogy blog, which is an amazing resource and just has tons of great ideas, technology and otherwise. And Jennifer Gonzalez introduced a couple of teachers who had implemented this in their classroom. And the idea was they were taking a Google Doc as a way to organize the learning and communicate with students that were differentiating. So similarly to the Google form, giving feedback that then puts students on to the next task, this is another way to kind of organize all the different pieces, all the disparate pieces of differentiated learning and different classroom activities where students have a choice, and pulling it into one place that's sort of easy for students to see. It's easy for you to communicate back and forth with them. And again, I also use Google Classroom and I use different LMSs, and I'll post different assignments, of course, there. But there's something about being able to look at a student and here is their doc and here are all the pieces, and I can sort of track, have they completed, what they've completed, they can write notes, and we can communicate back and forth, is really powerful. And I am a huge fan of using comments on Google Docs as a communication and a conversation with my students. I love being able to put in my comments, have them reply, tag me, I tag back, and it's a way to open up an ongoing conversation on a digital document, which is super useful in my opinion. So this is one way to think about using a doc as an organizational tool. So within this document, if you're going to have most of your students doing the same thing, or your students doing mostly the same thing, so say 60-70% of your activities are the same, you have one document, you push that out through Google Classroom, so each student gets their own playlist, and then you can go in and customize, so either offering choices and having students choose, or maybe you go in and write just specific different activities for students based on what they need, based on that data that you got from their Google Forms. Okay. Another great technique, which is a similar concept that I like, is the digital choice board. So choice boards are super useful. They're very handy to give lots of different options and let students take control sort of what they want to do. So instead of me organizing and moving my students into groups based on what I want, here are some options that I'm letting them take control and getting the choice of what they want to do. So this is a playlist that I used not with students, but with teachers. So I did a differentiated PD. So instead of me choosing one or two tools that I then walked everyone through like we're doing today, in person with a longer session, I tried something new, which was instead to let my teachers explore on their own and choose a different tool. So they could look at docs, sites, forums, Edpuzzle, and Pear Deck were the main tools that we used. And we were they could then look at some resources that I curated. So I offered some videos, some resources that they could look and learn a little bit about them. I have a try section with some different activities for each tool. So something that they could then try themselves and work together. And then a nice reflection box here where they could take their notes, reflect on what they thought about the tools, which is the other benefit to Google Docs as this the organizing tool for this, is that I love having a place where they can then keep their notes kind of in the playlist. And if they wanted to add some comments and tag me and start that conversation, all the better. What was beautiful about this was I was able to put teachers, in groups based on what they chose, so that they had a table together. They could support each other, and then I could circulate and answer questions and post challenges and move forward with that. So something we don't often think about doing for professional development, but we might think of doing in our classroom. And that was super fun, and it worked really well. It was great to try something new and for people to feel like they could control their choices of that session and get out of it what they wanted and what they needed, instead of maybe what I thought would work best for them. So these are the main things that I wanted to share with you today. Was a couple of tricks, ways to think about these very simple tools to maybe organize your classroom a little better, get some data, and help make the process of differentiation a little more smooth and efficient. So where are we on time, Veronica? I can add in one more quick tip if we have some time. Otherwise, we can end here.
Katie, I leave it up to you. Feel free to add more tip, definitely. Yeah,
sure. Okay, the last one that I will share that I wasn't sure if we would have time for is just a bonus tip on using Google Sites. So Google Sites I just love it. I think it's such an easy tool for students to use. It's such a fast, simple way to create a virtual site and a digital product that looks really great, that students can be proud of, especially with templates and with some of the formatting options. And this was another way that we didn't really think about using sites in this way, which is as e-portfolios and process journals. A lot of times with teachers, we've used this as almost like a brochure, a great nonfiction poster that we've turned into a website that they can go more in depth and post things. But with a PE class, we decided that it would be a good option for helping to differentiate skill development for students in class. And so what they did was they decided to use a site to track their progress towards goals that they set. So each student created some goals around soccer. They were playing soccer, and so they set some of their own goals of what they wanted to work on. And so they were able to work with partners and video some examples of the skills that they were developing, so that they could see their progress and they could see what was happening when they were shooting goals and doing this practice. And they uploaded that to Google Sites, and they would write a reflection. So they used this as basically a blog and an e-portfolio. And you can see this is the old Google Sites. It looks way better in the new Google Sites. That makes it so easy. And it was just a really easy way to include video and photos and text that was visually very appealing. It was easy to see how things progressed, and it was easy for teachers to look at their kind of portfolio as a whole and track that as a whole product. So that's my last tip on using simple Google tools for process in the differentiated classroom.
Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you. It was awesome. And I believe it was really useful for everyone. I could see some comments on the chat, but James, Abela, and Bogdan, Copil, they were really fast and able to reply questions. So thank you, guys.
Excellent. Thanks for the help.
Yeah, and I thank you, Katie, for your time, for your presentation. And I am looking forward to listening next one in the future.
Absolutely.
I think, Katie, you are presenting in April, I think so. So it's going to be.
Yes,
perfect.
I'll be back again. I can't wait.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Same to you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And now I would like to introduce you to James Abela and Bogdan Copil. Hi, James. Hi, Bogdan. How are you both doing?
Good, thank you. I really enjoyed the first two sessions, and I love the fact that the basic tools are just so powerful these days in Google Sites. And I just want to stress that Google Forms is just an incredible tool. In a previous life, I used to be a web designer, and a Google Form would take me 3 days to program back in the bad old days because it needed so much testing. And now Google Forms, you knock them out, well, in a lesson, don't you? For a lesson in 5 minutes.
Yeah, and as I was saying in the chat, that's also the tool that got me hooked up on the Google apps back then, and then Google Suite and now Google Workspace. But even now, like so many years later, I still discover these small tips and different ways in which people are using forms in the classroom. So that just shows how
being able
powerful
to add
it
a
is.
video into your feedback as well, that's just incredible. And I don't know when they added it, but I think it's fairly recent.
It's great. Yeah. Thank you for your input as well. And also, so I would like to say that James and Bogdan are going to run a presentation, but I would say more like an interview. And they would like to tell you a bit more about eSports in education. And what's great that James and Bogdan are based in different continents, so they will have different input. And I believe it's going to be useful for everyone. So Bogdan, I will add the presentation on the screen.
Sure. Yeah, but as you said, this will be more like a conversation rather than a presentation. So yeah, the presentation is good to have it there somewhere in the background, but the focus will be on us going through some discussion topics. So let me quickly introduce myself, and then James as well will introduce himself so you know where we come from. I am based in Prague, in the Czech Republic. I was a science teacher for quite a while, and now I am a Google for Education certified trainer and an ESTED trainer. So I'm delivering lots of training sessions revolving around technology in the classroom and pedagogy using technology and so on and so forth. And while doing this, I've also worked with teachers, mainly from Europe, looking at eSports and looking at how you can actually set up an eSports club in your school or program or something along those lines. And I'm interested to see also the Asian perspective from James. So James is based in Asia, but I'll let him say hello to you.
Yeah, and as I say, I'm James Abela. I teach out in Garden International in Kuala Lumpur. And really, I've been in and out of eSports for a long time. And it's interesting to see parental perspectives, what they think, and the many challenges, but also the real hunger that there is from students to try and have these kind of eSports. So it's been a very interesting experience. And I work together. I host CSTA, which is 150 computer science teachers all together. And we are trying to find common solutions to these problems. I'm not saying we've solved these problems. I'm not an expert, far removed. I'm somebody who's run some of these e-clubs over the last 10, 15 years with various amounts of success, and looking at establishing it in a different context is a challenge each time. And the challenges change each time as well. That's the other big thing.
Well, there are indeed lots of challenges. And one thing that I think is really important is the fact that there's also a barrier you have to cross in terms of people being reluctant to talking about games in schools and computer gaming and so on and so forth, be it teachers or parents or the wider community. So I think that having even this kind of events where we even have conversations about this topic and we are trying to make people aware of all the options and the fact that there are other communities doing this and the fact that they could get help or get inspiration or collaborate with others, it's great. So I was really happy when actually Acer suggested this topic for the summit. As you said, I think there's a lot of mentality shifts that need to happen in this, and that's why I said it's really good to have two different perspectives. I remember, so as I said, looking at it as more of a conversation rather than a presentation, I would like to touch on a couple of key points. Those being, hey, what's the big picture? Where are we now, more or less, with games in schools and esports and so on and so forth? And then we'll have a look at some of the opportunities, some of the challenges, and then we'll dive into how we can actually get going with a club or a program at our school. And I was just talking to James about this before the call. I remember when I started using Minecraft in school, and that was back in 2012. And back then, I actually had to get the written permission from my principal to hand it over to my kids so they could actually use Minecraft on the school computers, because it was such a big no-no back then to even think about games in school. I mean, why would you do that, right? Even though my kids made brilliant projects for the science lessons, they've built a whole island showing me where they would place the wind turbines, where they would place the geothermal plants, and so on and so forth. Or for another unit, they made a whole model of the lungs and the heart. You could even go to the heart and see the valves closing and opening. So that was, times definitely have changed. But one thing that I want to mention is that esports is not about just games, but it's about competitive games and actually having competitions between schools and
I
communities.
think that's one of the things we want to stress, is that Minecraft isn't this kind of game. Minecraft is electronic Lego. It's fun to play. There are possibly some competitive elements, but it's not a competitive game particularly. And that's why we love Minecraft. There's a lot of fun uses for it. There are some educational purposes to it too, but it isn't an e-game. And it's not free gaming because it's not competitive.
Yeah, so that's one of the key parts about the whole idea with esports. So there is a big component on competition and having different kind of tournaments, just like you would have the football tournaments, volleyball or swimming or whatever competitions you have between schools. And there were esports clubs starting with 2015. There was a big boom lately, especially in 2019. And there are quite a lot of games that are used. And James, I think you have more input here in terms of what games you've been using.
I mean, I think our first event that we got started in Garden, we ended up with Super Smash Brothers because it's Nintendo. It's considered to be family friendly, and it doesn't involve killing people. And I think anything that involves guns is pretty much a no-no in most schools. And so it is one of the areas we need to be really careful of and think ahead. Because the other problem is that students, the chances are they are playing these games. And when you start looking in the UK, we call them PEGI ratings, you will straight away see they are 16 or 18. And as teachers, we definitely have to set a good example. And that writes off a lot of the games that students are playing. And some of them really shouldn't be playing those, according to those official ratings. And in some cases, by law, they shouldn't be playing them to some extent. And we have to think about those and choose our games quite carefully. And we also have to think about it. Do we want them to be engaging with their brains, or is this purely for relaxation and competition, you know? A lot of sports, i.e. not electronic sports, there is a health benefit to it.
There are risks as well associated with other sports.
Well, yeah, I mean, rugby, there are risks to your head. Boxing, there are very serious risks. So, yeah, there are dangers. Similarly, there are benefits with esports if that is developing your actual brain power and thinking skills. That's a much easier sell than something that people don't think is there. But if you look at something like darts, again, you're developing certain skills. You're not really developing fitness. And there are certain sports where you would say, well, actually, is it developing general good, healthy fitness, or is it developing very specialized fitness or not developing fitness at all. We mustn't forget that these are things. So a good Olympic sport that's a great example is chess. You know, it requires brain power. I'd say the physical aspect of it is pretty limited, but you know, your brain is getting a good workout.
And I just want to piggyback on the idea of the PEGI rating that you've mentioned earlier. I think that this is a key part to understand for everybody, that when you look at games, it's not a separate universe. So you shouldn't apply different rules to games as to what you do in every other aspect. We have rules also for using social media, for example. Like you shouldn't have a Facebook profile if you're under 13. Yet this is happening in many cases, and so on and so forth. This all falls under the big umbrella of digital citizenship. And that's why I just wanted to stress that out. It's not about games or this or that. There's a bigger umbrella, and we should be consistent across the board. So I really like that that you've mentioned that as well.
Yeah, and I think it is one of those things. You know, you wouldn't play an underage video to somebody. So I think, you know, we follow the guidance that's available in our countries. PEGI is pretty good because it's UK based, and most people listening to this will be English speaking, so it's quite easy. The Americans have a teen rating, which again gives you a pretty good guidance, and they're normally very much in line, to be honest. There are the occasional, sometimes it's 12, sometimes it's 13, and any game with an online aspect should be a 13 rated game.
Yep, exactly. So now that we got that out of the way, just something that we need to be aware of, I would just like to mention the fact that also when it comes to how we might think of organizing such clubs or programs at our school, there are many different ways in which you can approach these games, many different play formats, anything from social clubs. Just think about chess, because you gave the example of the chess, right? You could have a chess club in the school, and then you could compete with other people in your region or a league, and so on and so forth, and then you would progress. So something similar is also available for eSports or games, and it's getting more and more popular depending on the region where you actually are. And of course, this is happening because there are quite a lot of benefits actually to playing games, as you've mentioned already. Yes, there are things we have to be aware of, but there are some benefits as well. So I would just like to mention a couple of them and just throw in some discussion starters. And this is also one of those conversations that happens a lot about girls in STEM, right? We want to have more girls in STEM. Well, it turns out that actually girls who game are more likely to choose STEM subjects as well. So we could even start from that perspective, as in equity and equitable access and so on and so forth. So it even goes to this level, levels that you would think like, hey, what's the connection? There are also basically colleges that now offer eSports scholarships. So this is mainly in the US, but this is growing. And this is just like you would get a scholarship for American football or any other sports. Now you do have this kind of scholarships as well.
Yeah, and number 3, I just want to mention this. In the UK, there's a qualification called BTEC, which is an eSports qualification, and it's worth UCAS points, which means just like an A-level or another university access qualification, you can actually go to university with it. And there are now eSports degrees at some universities. So it's a great way to motivate students who might not otherwise be as motivated in some other aspects of schools. And it does mean that there is a possibility of doing it and actually getting onto an event and possibly even a degree.
Exactly. So, and also keep in mind, this is just the beginning of it. So it's quite a young field. So the possibilities are quite endless, I would say. And I liked what Seti from Flip Classroom Tutorials was writing in the comments. Like, there are also so many awesome board games that could even be used for a club at a school. So you can also think about, okay, if you would have already a board game club, could we combine it maybe with a digital option, especially now with distance learning and so on and so forth.
And also there are now digital board games. So there are many ways to do this and to look at it. And one thing I would stress is that the evidence is showing that those students and people who've been in lockdown and have been playing their fair share of video games are actually mentally much better off than other people. I mean, a lot of people are saying, oh, well, how do we kill time? And I have to say, Bogdan, I have not had any what I would call downtime, free time. I could definitely do another 100, 200 hours in lockdown, and I wouldn't run out of things to do.
Exactly, and I'm really happy that you've mentioned that study. So there was a recent study from the Oxford University showing that, hey, people that actually played during the lockdown, they were in a much better mental state because you did have that thing to keep you focused on, and so on and so forth. But besides that, there are many other benefits that we can talk about. Of course, depending on what games you're approaching, there's strategic thinking and planning involved, or teamwork or collaboration, even leadership, because in some team cooperative games you have to assign roles and guide the team, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of communication happening. So of course, when you're playing in a team and you have to win, you're competing with the other team, you have to be in contact with your teammates all the time, and so on and so forth. But there's also the whole idea of time management, micromanaging. That's a big one actually that I didn't even add on the slide. So some games are really powerful from that perspective when you need to micromanage different processes at the same time.
And you need to multitask, really, don't you?
So when you add all of these things on top of each other, so you have to build your base and your army, and then you have to collaborate with your team members, and you have to think about the bigger picture and the strategy for that game. It turns into quite a complex project overall. What about the grades? So, because you've been doing the esports already, was there any conversation with regards to grades in your case, or were there concerns or parents that were concerned about this, or have you noticed anything?
I mean, as I say, at the moment, it depends on the clubs, but in some cases, when I was running it, I was in a boarding school, so it was considered fine during prep time after homework had done it. So in some places, it can be used as a benefit, or it can be an incentive. You will be allowed time to join the club, or use the club, or use the games. Currently, I think in some ways, some parents, certainly I've been talking to my colleagues in Singapore, they're saying that's the 1 hour they're allowed to play. And when I was running a club in the library, that was the hour they were allowed to play games. It was finite, it was limited. The rest of the time, they weren't allowed to play those games. And I think the other thing that you mentioned about social was, you would have thought these kind of games, playing video games, would be a quiet thing. No, it's not. The students are really talking to each other. Sometimes to a point I have to tell them to get the volume down, because they're exciting, they're sharing ideas, even with games which they're not actually playing in a team with each other or even against each other. They're still talking and sharing that excitement. So I think those are some things that I would like to share, generally speaking. And as I say, we've done very well with games clubs and games times and things in the past, and now we're looking at how we can turn this into a real e-sport. Is the next level for us, kind of a regular e-sport with across Southeast Asia is the plan. Well,
and that's a big plan, and I like that. So you have to keep the big goals in mind as well, right? And I like the fact that you've mentioned that the game time might be limited, so it's best to make use of it when you have it. But of course, there are downsides as well. And while I was talking to teachers in schools in Europe about starting an esports program or just talking about games in school, there were many conversations happening around the downsides. And actually, the focus in many cases can easily fall on this part, because if you don't have the right input for these conversations, you can easily get overwhelmed. And that's why it's really a good idea to connect with others who are already doing this, or to get some inspiration from others. And you have the usual questions like, should students be exercising? What's the time required, or in time investment required, and so on and so forth. You've already mentioned the age ratings, so we've taken that out of the way. But there are some others that we would need to look into. So, for example, the high cost and the devices, right? Because these go hand in hand. What's your take on this?
I mean, for me, I think a lot of the games now, like League of Legends, Minecraft, and a lot of the currently popular esports games don't require great specs. So when you pick the game, it's important. If students are going to bring in devices, a lot of students are in situations where they're already bringing in iPads and things like that. And iPads are possible for e-games. They're not necessarily the best device, but the other devices are about the same cost. So if you look at something like a Nintendo Switch, again, you have to have your policies in place, and you have to treat it like a one-to-one device, an iPad or a laptop. And the price of a gaming laptop is, for example, cheaper than, say, a MacBook in many cases. So you're looking at the same kind of price range and the same kind of costs and things. And as I say, you need to have those policies in place, and you need to treat them exactly the same as any other device you bring in. In terms of school devices, it is so important if you're doing graphics design or something like that to have a decent graphics card, and that's enough to support most of the e-games, because a lot of these e-games don't need the latest and greatest hardware, and they're not really dependent on that either. You don't get a much better experience, say, on League of Legends with an amazingly improved graphics card compared to something that's 3-4 years old.
Exactly, and this is a key point, because usually, indeed, the gaming industry is one key player when it comes to pushing the development of new hardware and stronger computer and faster computers and so on and so forth. And I think this is why many teachers have this idea in mind that, hey, I need the best computer for an esports club, which is not the case. So you very well laid it out, like, hey, yes, you do need a computer that can run games. You don't need the most powerful or the most recent graphics card. And at the end of the day, when you draw the line, the price would not be very different. In my previous school, for example, students had MacBook Airs, as you've mentioned. And the whole idea is, hey, you've mentioned also policies. Schools don't necessarily need to buy devices. They could also lease them, because many schools do that with the devices as well. So bottom line, when there's a way, when there's a will, there's a way. And I would stress this idea of policies and having a whole framework in the school as well.
Yeah, and as I say, there are very cheap devices, things like Raspberry Pis, and they're not going to get you an amazing experience, but you'll still be able to play games on them and start a simple club.
Yeah. What about the parents' buy-in? Was it easy for you to get a parents' buy-in?
So far, it's been okay, because we've steered away from the really violent games. So I know kids like things like Counter-Strike Go. We've steered away from those straight shooting games. We've tried to stress more strategic games. And the event, Super Smash Brothers, students were already playing that because they brought in their own devices. And so that was kind of a fun day out rather than you're going to play it. And as I say, so far, generally parents have been reasonably supportive, because we haven't made it an all-in everyday event. It's been ad hoc events. In previous schools, it's been fine, because it's been limited time has been spent on these things. And a boarding school has the advantage, you're in control of the time they get on the computers.
Exactly. And I liked what Tim was saying in the comments, like, especially in the current times, this is like basically, this was one of the ways in which students actually connected and they collaborated. And I think this would be helpful also for anybody going forward. We could start thinking now about what's happening nowadays, gather data, and then have this data for the parents in the future and tell them, hey, look, actually games were really useful also during the distance learning period and the whole craziness with.
And there is a huge e-safety aspect, which having it in school makes it much safer. So they're not choosing inappropriate games, they're choosing appropriate games, age-appropriate games, and they're not going onto bad servers. They're using the appropriate servers as decided by the teachers.
Exactly. So that's even better, because you already start with the already curated list of resources and games and servers and so on and so forth. Now, there's also the big question that always pops up in conversations with parents, at least whenever I had a conversation with parents about games. What about addiction? Will my kid get addicted to computer games? And my answer was always, instead of fearing about kids getting addicted to computer games or games in general, why don't we try to better understand the mechanisms of addiction and then address those mechanisms? Because the same mechanism can apply to computer games, to sugar or sweets, to watching too much TV, to even some sports in certain cases. So I think it's better also for schools to play that role of informing the parents and just having conversations about it. It's like, hey, it's not the games necessarily that create the addiction. Let's understand the mechanism behind it. And then let's leverage that so that we avoid addiction, and we teach our students also how to realize when, hey, I should slow it down maybe, or I should
I
watch
think
my
the other
time.
thing is a lot of parents are already allowing their children to play games. It's very rare that a student joins your club and has never played a video game before. And so I think this, like you say, is a way to educate, to limit, and to keep things in a healthy way. And I think, yeah, that's really important.
Exactly. And I've just realized we don't have so much time left. So I think we'd better dive into and just give some random ideas, like pointers. How would you actually start, right? So how would you even get such a program going? And these are just some ideas that that we wanted to share. Like, as you said, it's good to have a big goal in mind, but you can start where you are. So if there are students already doing something similar in your school, start there. You could start it as an after school club, for example, or whatever. One thing that's important though is, I apologize for that, you do need to have one responsible person, at least one teacher who says, hey, I'm going to take care of this, and we'll get it running.
Now that person doesn't have to be very technically able. Maybe if you have an IT technician, they might also be already enthusiastic.
Exactly. And that's a good point. So it's not about them being, and they don't even have to be a gamer necessarily. They could just have this idea of supporting students in this journey, right? Yes. What I think is also really important is to have a code of conduct and have expectations and rules, just like you have for any other after school club. And then maybe even if it gets to funding, because this is something that schools were doing, like they wanted to have an eSports team, and they were like, well, we do need some devices, we don't have money for it. How about we involve the students in the whole idea, in the funding, in the just raising the money, having different events like you would have in a school as a fundraiser. So then all of a sudden you start from the eSports club, but then you teach kids also the idea of,
well, I also think there are huge benefits, because graphics cards are exactly that. They're designed. So if you want 3D design, you want those kind of things. They're not just used for games. The computers are needed for all sorts. And you don't need an amazing graphics card. A lot of the built-in graphics cards are fine if you've got a reasonably new computer. And you know, the benefits are already there.
Exactly. Now, of course, once you get it going, there will be some hoops that you'll have to go through, and there will be some roadblocks, but it's important to just try to keep the momentum. So once again, this does bring a lot of change. So some schools are reluctant to change. So keep in mind that there will be there might be some opposition from some teachers, from some parents, depending on where you are in the school. It's good to be consistent and to schedule those practice times and have after school activities and so on and so forth. But one thing that I wanted to focus on is 3 and 4, because this is so well connected to the whole idea of us as educators. So, okay, we are playing games, but we don't stop there. So just like after a football game, you go and analyze the recording and see what you could have done better and so on and so forth. You can turn this also in a teachable moment, or just talk about these strategies and see what they've done and what they could have done better, and so on and so forth.
And I think also, I was just going to say, I think also it's really important that, you know, a lot of parents want to hear about communication skills.
Exactly.
And there is no better way to teach communication skills than esports, because you have to work as a team, and communication is absolutely critical. I can't think of another low-risk environment to actually get people so involved as a team. And you don't have day waders in these teams, because that just hasn't happened. So I think it's a great way to do it in what, you know, it's a low-risk environment, but at the same time, it feels exciting.
Exactly. And I like what Amy was saying in the comments, like for D&D Club, Dungeons and Dragons, the students were in charge, so they were leading the whole thing. They just had a supervisor. So once again, you get them in this role of where they have to organize things and they have to keep things in check. And one other thing that I liked is also the fourth number on the list. Like, you always have those kids that are not athletic enough to be in the football team or whatever, or they don't want to run after a ball, right? So this is a good alternative for some of them. It might be a good alternative for the after school activities, for example. But even within the club, if you have less skilled players, the whole idea is, hey, do offer support for them as well. And this can come from both their colleagues and from the teachers and so on and so forth. Now, we are really getting close to the end of the time. So I just want to give some final pointers. What would you say would be the most important thing for you right now, James? You are involved in this part and you've done.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, I'm kind of reintroducing it to our school. And I think really the important thing is, I would say, although you should give students some choices in terms of games, try to make sure your first choices of games are not the controversial ones. So they should be the games that involve strategy, no more than 12 or 13 rated. And you can show clear benefits for you. If you go in with something like Counter-Strike, where it would be easy to say, oh, and kids are coming to their school and playing as terrorists.
Yeah. That's
You've
not
got a hard sell.
It's not only a hard sell, but it's also something that, you shouldn't really do as an educator at school. So I really like that.
I mean, I think that's the. I mean, there is a rating for Counter-Strike, and if you have got 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, then perhaps there is some justification. But we shouldn't be playing those kind of games. So I think free choice isn't necessarily the way to get things started. In some cases.
Well, free choice from an already curated pool of.
Yes, I think that's it. I think from a curated selection is a key point, and making sure it is a sensible selection, because and making sure that students understand that they are representing their school like they would in any other sport. If you went into rugby, went thumping and kicking and kneeing people, it's going to look bad on your school and not show the appropriate way of doing things.
And once again, this is where I think it perfectly blends with the idea of digital citizenship. So you have sportsmanship in sports. I think we could call it e-sportsmanship, or we could tie it in the digital citizenship part.
Absolutely.
But I think that's a key part as well. So I just want to quickly mention two resources. As we said, Acer is involved in this field, and they are actually doing quite a lot in terms of supporting schools and just in general supporting the esports scene, right? And we're talking about hardware. So just if you want to have a look at some of the devices, so you have an idea of the fact that, as we said, you don't have to invest into the latest, most expensive things and so on and so forth, but there are many options that you could have a look at. And especially when it comes to tournaments and competing and whatnot, you could have a starting point just to have a look at what are some of the possible devices. More than that, though, rather than just focusing on the hardware part, there's also that support I was mentioning at the beginning, the community aspect, right? And Acer just launched a platform called Planet 9, and it's basically a great platform for anything related to esports and just connecting to other gamers out there and other teams and so on and so forth. So I would invite you to check out the website. And just to give you an idea of what you can actually find on the website, you do have some of the things that we've already mentioned, right? So you could battle with others, so you could actually take part into different competitions, or you could connect with other gamers out there. But there's also the whole idea of, hey, I would like to learn and to become better at things, right? So you could have some resources, gamers showing you some of their strategies and so on and so forth. Or you could even just go and check some of the recordings of the games and learn from that. I think this is really key for many cases where you would actually need some input for this, right? As a teacher, you say, I have this e-club, but I need to have some material, and just like you would watch a documentary in the science lesson and then talk with your students about it, or you would watch a football match in the PE lesson and then talk with your students about the strategies and so on and so forth, this would be a great resource as well. Wow, time flies by.
Right, it does. Yeah, it's nice to see that everybody's got some nice comments going on there. I love it. So yeah.
Yeah.
Veronica
said
there's no way you two are going to talk for 30 minutes without even cutting a breeze. She's on the money there. Thank you very much.
Well, I was just getting warmed up, so I could talk about the topic for way longer. But I'm happy that we got the conversation started.
That's right.
At least.
Yes. And as I say, do stay in touch. My Twitter's there. And as I say, if you are a computing teacher, then please do get in touch, because as I say, although we started in Southeast Asia, we're now well into Europe, Switzerland, UK, France, Monaco, I believe we're getting towards, and all the way into the US now. So we're growing from a Southeast Asian base. And as I say, if you are a computing teacher, please, it's a free membership. So just get in touch.
You're taking over the world step by step.
It feels like it, especially seeing as it started off with like 5 of us.
Thank you, Amy. So glad to hear that. And I do hope that there were some ideas coming. And feel free to get in touch if you have any other questions, or as Jane said, we'll be more than happy to help out.
Yeah. Thank you, Bogdan. Thank you, James. I think that this is a really important topic, especially these days, and it was really useful. As you mentioned, that a lot of people are scared. I hope they can see now that it's not scary. It can be more useful and helpful for kids and for the connection, really, especially because they can feel alone nowadays.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I would like to also say thank you to everyone watching us. As well, we have additional upcoming events, as you can see. So feel free to register for our upcoming virtual summit taking place on 6th and 7th of March. The next free virtual summit, it's going to be on the 13th of March. It's going to be run by Lisa, based in the US, and the theme is going to be Google Women, because it's women month. And also would like to highlight our free virtual enterprise summit taking place on the 3rd of March. So feel free to joining us again. It was great. It was great time. Thank you for your questions, inputs, anything like that. Have a great day. And thank you, James. Thank you, Bogdan. Have a great day.
Thank you as well.
Bye.